tips and systems today. Just give me a second for all the streams to launch. Make sure everything's connected okay. Instagram, there we go. All right. Welcome all. Another Ask Me Anything session. Yeah, hop on if you have questions. The audio's glitching, isn't it, again? All right, we're switching microphones because it's just not happening. How about that? That should be much better there. We'll try this one. Let that. Let's see, how about that? I love that you can hear me typing. Okay, perfect. Much better on audio. So yeah, today we want to talk about all the home systems. It's kind of how I articulate them, of the different functions and parts of a home. And talk through quick tips, quick fix tips, maintenance things. Would love to hear your thoughts of what you've ran into. I'm gonna put my earbuds out now that we're cruising. So the first one I thought would be good to talk about is electrical, because we could talk all day about electrical. And disclaimer, anything we talk about today, if you do not feel comfortable doing, don't do it. Definitely, I'm not warranting or guaranteeing everything is safe. Every home is different. So disclaimer, find somebody who is comfortable. If you are not, have them help you or hire a professional. Yeah, so electrical. The way a lot of homes are designed is in Utah is you have an electrical meter on the outside of your home. So that's where like the main power comes in off the power lines. There's usually at least one main breaker there that will shut off the entire home, everything downstream. Some homes have all of their breakers outside, so you have to, click them all off if you want them all gone. Other homes have then a second breaker panel inside the home that then allows you to turn off each room individually or each appliance individually. The older homes, one of the things that you'll see that's an issue that comes up over time, if it's super old, they'll have sometimes what's called knob and tube electrical. I'm going to pull up some photos and kind of show you what this looks like. We're talking early 1900s homes. Let me share a window here. Knob and tube. So you've probably seen some old barns, some old basements where they have, these are actually ceramic, and then there's a metal bolt screwing it to the wood or something like that. This is called knob and tube. So essentially you've got like two wires, but this tube it's like a canvas or a fiberglass. There's a few different versions and varieties of it, but it's a hollow tube that the wire runs through. Because it's fiberglass or canvas, electricity can jump through it. It doesn't necessarily stay contained in there. It's not perfectly electrically sound. So they call the little ceramic pieces the knobs. Here's some other pictures. So if an old home, and there are still some old homes who have this, and it works, it can be risky. It needs to be properly inspected to make sure it's still safe, but it is highly recommended that this always be replaced. This is so old, it can cause fires, all sorts of stuff. And kind of like I said, even touching it, sometimes you can get electrocuted because it doesn't actually insulate and cover and protect the wire as much as it should, and partially because sometimes it's 100 years old. Nothing is going to last 100 years. So first thing to know, super old homes may have this. The other thing that we ran into with electrical stuff, not copper, copper's the new standard, is during the, I think it was like the late 60s, 70s, I actually had a home that had this. They used aluminum wiring instead of what you've probably heard of today as copper wiring. So it's similar to today's standards where it's got a plastic sheath, plastic coating, but it is actually aluminum. I think this was partially due, to wars or different things that were happening. Copper was expensive, copper was harder to get, aluminum was more available. Voila, we're going to use aluminum. The problem that you run into with aluminum is when you run electricity through it, it gets hotter than copper does. So it has a fire risk. You can tell kind of the difference of the aluminum and copper is the aluminum is like that silver color, and copper is truly like a copper color. So sometimes you can open up your panel and see this. Now, one thing that we do still use, aluminum wire is still used for, they call it the main service wire. So that's like the mega big one that's either coming in off the street or going from the outside panel to the inside panel. Oftentimes those are still aluminum. Because it's a little more flexible, they do other coatings on there to make sure that the temperatures are proper. Other reasons I'm not sure, not an electrician. So things to check, especially if you're buying an older home, either built in the 60s or 70s or even before that, what kind of wiring is going on? I bought a home in West Valley and it was all aluminum wiring, and I needed to replace it all. Just, needed to be done, make sure it's safe. And it's difficult after a home's built to replace all the wiring. Same with plumbing, to replace all the plumbing. You have an outlet, almost on every wall, and you have a wire running there. So you either have to punch little holes across the wall to feed that wire through all the 2x4s, or you've got to make a big hole and run it through somehow. So yeah, this home in West Valley that I bought, it was really run down. It was a HUD home, so there was like no ceiling in the kitchen. The roof needed to be replaced. The kitchen had mold. Almost a total gut job. Totally had to replace the kitchen. Totally had to replace the bathrooms. Everything else had to be painted. The flooring had to be replaced. So doing all that work, that was the other part for me, was might as well change out the wiring. If I'm going to do all this work, add these new outlets, replace this kitchen stuff, it's not, it's frowned upon, and there's some safety reasons for it, but you're not supposed to mix aluminum and copper wiring in the same panel. There's like some chemical reactions that can take place. So if I was adding these new circuits, I would either have to figure out how to go find aluminum wiring, because that's not sold anymore, or not add new circuits with copper. So the answer was just to replace it all. But yeah, a lot of patching of walls. I'm no good at that, so I had to hire that out. And then, yeah, had to replace the panels inside and out, make sure everything's up to speed. The other thing that you see, especially with knob and tube, there's only two lines. It's kind of like positive and negative, positive and neutral. There's not a ground line. And so this older home with copper, or with aluminum, did have a lot of grounding, but there was areas that it wasn't grounded. Grounding, what that means, you have like an outlet, you've got the two up and down spots and then the circle in the middle or toward the bottom. That circle is the ground. It literally connects out to the dirt. Out by your panel somewhere, you may not see it, but there is, it's usually about a 4 to 6 foot copper rod that they have banged down into the ground, and there's a wire coming out of the panel that goes to it, and then from that panel it comes inside and it works its way to every single outlet. It's meant to be, should there be, some electrical issue with an appliance, a surge, sometimes stuff like that, it will take the excess, devices will take the excess, and instead of just shutting down, melting down, it'll dump that extra electricity down the ground line to get rid of it. So grounding is very important. It keeps people safe. Yeah, good things to have. There are, if you ever wonder about, what does grounding look like, there are some outlet testers. I think this exact one. Klein Tools is a decent brand. You plug this in and it'll tell you, is it correct? Is there a fault? Is it grounded? Is there an open? Is there a hot? Like, are wires backwards sometimes in there? The other thing this tool is really cool for is the GFCIs, or GFI, depending how you hear it. Ground fault interrupters, ground fault circuit interrupters, it's what those stand for. This is oftentimes the stuff that you'll see in the bathrooms where it has the test and reset buttons. These things. Sometimes they're red and black, sometimes they're just white. These are kind of an interesting device. They're meant to keep you safe in areas like where there's water, that electricity could possibly go through you and either get to the water or something else and electrocute you in the process. What's happening here is there's some circuitry in there that is measuring how much power is going out the one side and how much is coming back the other side. And it's kind of like a little scale. If it tilts one way or another, if more is going out than is coming in, it like breaks it, and it's so fast. So minute amounts of power will strip it and break it. And the idea is to keep us safe. Should we accidentally, drop the toaster in the bathtub, is the comical example we see in cartoons, or the hair dryer in the bathtub because we decided to do our hair. Instead of getting electrocuted, it just shuts off the power. So that little circuit tester will also test these outlets. You can push the test button and it will create that imbalance from a device as if you've plugged it in, and it'll test to see that it's shut off. Now sometimes you'll see just regular outlets and not know if they're protected or not with GFI or GFCI. Sometimes in your panel where your circuit breakers are is where you'll see that kind of test and reset button. These are kind of used a little more broadly, and it's just a matter of balancing price. You can either pay, sometimes the cheapest ones for the outlets are $10 each. These I think usually run around $30. So if you have 2, sometimes 3 GFIs, it can be cheaper to just buy the breaker and use regular outlets, and everything in that circuit will be GFI protected. This is good for like outdoor outlets, outlets in the eaves for Christmas lights, holiday lights, because you'll have multiple outlets, and it's hard to, sometimes it'll be hard to get up on the eaves to push that reset button should it trip, whereas having it in the panel is a lot easier. And then it's a balance of price. Now, if we're going to get really fancy, there is arc fault circuit interrupters as well. And you notice they're a different color button. Yellow is the common one that you see for ground fault interrupters. Arc fault are usually white. And then you'll also see blue. Blue is where it's arc fault and ground fault. Arc fault is a way to test if there's like a break in the wire. These were code for a little while, but I think they've stepped back out of code and they're not code currently. So some homes have them, some homes don't. But the white is measuring, sometimes maybe you've seen people use a drill and you see like a bunch of sparks kind of kicking out of it. It tests for things like that. What happens essentially in a wall if you have a wire that is starting to like break apart and it's arcing between there to make the current flow? It can be like minute, like, this tiniest little sliver. When that happens, it's extremely hot and it ups the voltage. It's kind of a weird electrical system thing. The reason it exists as a circuit breaker is that if that's arcing, it can create a fire in your walls because it's so hot. Opposed to just running through the wire, it's maintaining a good temperature and it's safe. I don't recommend anybody to really look at changing breakers in your panel. That definitely should be left to a professional or somebody who absolutely knows what they're doing. These connect on to some main, they call them like bus bars in your panel after you take the cover off. And those bars are a lot of power coming in and a lot of voltage. It is easy to hurt yourself. Don't do it. If you don't know what you're doing, don't even take that cover off the panel. Now, further down the line, oftentimes you hear people changing light switches or outlets. A common thing anymore with outlets is getting some that have USB in them. This is super nice because you can charge your devices right from the wall and not have to use a brick. It has essentially the guts, the electronics of the brick in the wall. These are generally a little safer for folks to change out themselves because you're going you're stepping down essentially. You're going from that main panel that's got all that power, cutting it in half for one small circuit, and then you've got that circuit breaker that separates and isolates it out. I always, if you're ever going to change one of these, turn off the breaker, make sure there's no power. Some of the ways you can test that there's no power is that same circuit tester that I showed you. And then there's also these pen looking things. These are kind of cool because you can just like touch the plastic wire without actually touching the metal, and it'll sense if there's like electricity in that wire. So once you do open the outlet, you can, poke around and see, okay, there's no power here. The common ones that you'll see a lot is something like this, where it has the probes. This only works if you're touching actual like copper wire, and you have to touch both because this is just measuring the difference between two spots, whereas that little pen thing is just measuring, is there power here? Different questions. This is more technical, specific. It gets into the specific voltage, specific amperages. A lot of people don't need that, don't need to know, don't care. So yeah, getting a tool like this is great to kind of help in that journey. So with outlets, let's see if we can just find a picture of a back of an outlet. Yes, here's a good one. So most outlets will look like this. You'll have, you know, the front part with two plugs, and then you've got two screws on one side, two screws on another, and then there's actually going to be another on the bottom or the top. So we see like right here is that other one. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So you've got one side that is black, essentially, one side that's white, so neutral and power. And then this one over here is the ground. So you can kind of see the hot bus. I think they're usually copper color. The neutral, which is the usually white wire you see in the walls, is the white, and then the grounding screw. We don't need all the guts to know how this works. Some outlets will have this kind of stab-in connection, they call it. You can strip the wire so long and just push it in. These are okay, but they're really hard to reuse. Most of the time you have to cut them, and then you have to, you know, re-splice off the wire or take off the insulation. I usually love using these kind that have a screw. And there's some like this where they'll have a plate that you can actually just tighten it against and not have to wrap the wire around the screw like you see here. Let me find a good example. It's going to be like a compression back of outlet with compression plate, I think is what it's called. Yeah, this looks right. So it looks a little bit different. And they're usually like 30 cents more or something, you know, super small like that. Oh yeah, we're really zoomed in here. Okay. I can't move the mouse, but so if you notice this plate here under the screw, as you tighten the screw down, it kind of squeezes the wire in between here. So you're able to just put it straight in, screw it down so it's kind of pressed in tight. I like these kind. I think they're easier than trying to wrap the wire back and forth around the screws to tighten it up. Lots easier. So if you can find these, if you need to change outlets, that is the way to go, in my opinion. Easiest way to change an outlet is when you take it out, note where the wires are connecting on the current outlet. Even as you take them off, move them to like that side. Like if there's 4 wires on it, put that one up there, put that one down there, put that one down there, and put that one up there as you take them off the outlet. And on the new outlet, likely you're going to put them right back in the same places. Usually that's an easy way to go. If you're going to switch out for the kind of GFCI or the outlets that have USB, let's see, back of outlet with USB. Sometimes these will look a little different because you have, you know, this big brick that's normally your charger brick that's built into the wall now. Sometimes you only see one connector per side. So those 2 wires, as example, instead of being on those 2, you'd need them on just one. Yeah, like this one we can kind of see it's flat along the side, and then there's just the one screw on this side. There's going to be one screw on the other, and then the ground is going to be either on the top or the bottom somewhere. Yeah, tons of options. You can get super fancy with stuff like this where they like pop out. Some of them are just USB. If you don't need an outlet plug at all and just more USB plugs, great. The other thing a lot of people will want to switch out is light switches. Let's see, different. So I'm sure you've seen the different varieties over, time. You've got this kind of traditional lever flipping up and down. You've got the big rocker panel. That's kind of the new common. That's what I've got here is big flat ones. You've got ones that you can touch that are motion. You've got dimmers. You've got super smart ones that you've got multiple buttons. On and on and on. Here's that rocker kind of an example. So the way light switches are categorized is based on the number of poles. What this means is essentially is how many switches are there, like how many switches are there to turn on and off the light. Some rooms that are larger, like living rooms, you might have a switch by the front door, and then there might be a switch by the kitchen that both will work to turn that light on or off. Single pole are where there's one switch, one light. That's it. There are three-way that are that situation I described. You've got three different parts. You've got the light, a switch over there, and a switch over there. It can get complicated and do a four-way. These start boggling my brain. I'm really good at electricity. I went to auto school, so I'm super technical, but these start to boggle my brain. There's one of the clients I helped with earlier this year. He had to change these out, and we had to map out every different wire, because in four-way switches you have 4 wires connecting on the back of the switch, and then a ground wire. And essentially it's either connecting these 2 wires together or these 2 wires together is the detail, technical. But when you have that switch and another switch that's a 4-way and another switch that's a 4-way for the light, because now we have 4 different pieces for that electrical circuit, it starts to get pretty complicated. Not for the faint of heart. I've never seen anything crazier than that, but sometimes you can have 4-way switches. Sometimes they tie in with 3-way switches. Yeah, people get creative. Rotary dimmers, you've seen those probably from the 80s, where you just turn it, and as you continue to turn it, makes it brighter and brighter and brighter. Now a lot of times we have these slide dimmers. Either you have a switch or just all the way at the bottom is the off position. Here's another example of a dimmer switch. You got the slider on the side for the brightness. This is like the wall control for digital lights and fancy stuff. You can turn on, turn off, up the brightness, down, drop down the brightness. Occupancy switches are great. They are motion sensor, but then they also have a button to turn them on and off. These are great for things like closets. You open the door, you can usually set a timer on these. They'll go for a couple minutes, and then if they don't sense any motion, they'll turn back off. Great for closets, pantries, garages, stuff like that. So majority of switches are going to be single pole. Single pole are pretty easy to swap out. Again, turn off the power. Use your little tester to make sure the power is off. Just because the light's off doesn't mean there's not still power in that outlet, in that box. There's literally a box in the wall where the switch is. Test those wires. Make sure before you start playing around so you don't hurt yourself. But these are super simple. There's 2 connectors and then a ground. That's it. And it's literally like, as you flip the switch, it's either connecting the wires internally or it's separating them. That's it. So whenever you open a light switch that you want to swap out, you literally take those 2 wires off, put the 2 wires on the new one, put the ground wire, done. Quite simple. 3-way are another common. I'm not going to go over 4-way. Those are more complicated, but 3-way are a little more common that you'll see. And how these are operating is, let's see, what have I got? It's a good descriptor. You have this black, you see this black screw here. That's kind of like the common is what they call it. And you're connecting, you've got, sorry, all over the place. There are 3 connectors on a 3-way. You've got the black that's common. You've got this gold. Usually the other side is gold too. Sometimes maybe it might be a silver. But what's happening with the electronics behind this is you've got the black one that's either connecting over here to this one or it's connecting over here to that one. It's like alternating between those 2. So when you take an existing 3-way switch out of your wall, make note of what and where those wires are connected. You'll usually see, like, again, a black or some blue sometimes. Whatever wires connected that black or that blue, that's the wire that needs to go to the new black or blue. And then the others need to go on those other sides as well. Again, pretty easy with, just like that single pole switch, pretty easy to swap out. Put some new lights up. Let's close this up. Oh, what else do we have for electrical? Something I recommend in a lot of homes. You know how you buy surge protectors? There's whole home surge protectors. You're gonna want a professional or somebody who knows what they're doing to do this, because you have to do it at the panel. Here's an example. Thanks for the smile, dude. But you can kind of see what a panel looks like inside. It's a mess of wires. This one's actually very organized. Sometimes it literally looks like chaos. Oh, come on, there we go. But there's whole home circuit breakers that they'll install either next to a breaker, or if your panel is outside your home, sometimes they'll put it on the outside, have it stick out. But bringing it in, hooking it up, you're going to want a professional to do that. So there's a couple different versions, and these are usually not too expensive. They're usually about $100. What's nice about these whole home ones is that it covers the fridge, it covers the AC, it covers the furnace. Those are very expensive items, and anymore they're just as complicated as a computer. They have tons of electronics, and if a surge were to happen, those things get wiped out. So paying $90 to have a whole home surge protector, well worth it in my opinion. I put these on my homes. They're so great. And then you can actually save money because you don't have to do surge protectors all throughout your house. Sometimes a surge protector inside is like $60 for a TV or for a stereo system. So having this for an outside, $90, you've saved yourself already right there. What happens with surge protectors? It's kind of like that grounding thing that we talked about with the ground fault interrupters. It's monitoring how much voltage usually is in the system. And if that amount of voltage goes above a certain number, a threshold, it dumps that excess out to a ground line. So that way you're maintaining a specific voltage. Like when lightning strikes, you probably have heard it's like 20,000 volts, whereas your home is like 110 volts. So there's obviously a very big difference there. If you put a 10,000 volts onto a computer, it's going to fry. So this will very quickly respond and dump that excess out, so that way it's not going to your devices, it's offloading it down the ground line. Yeah, really cool things. Highly recommend them. The other thing I always recommend, that I recommend to a lot of folks too, if it makes sense, solar panels. I have solar panels on my home, and it is so nice to have my utility bill mostly paid for. You can do battery backups on these so that if there is a power outage, you can still have power, run off your batteries. That's definitely deep down the rabbit hole for electrical stuff, but most of these you have to hire a professional. There's a lot of technical involved. There's permits. But I highly recommend them. I think they're well worth the cost. Questions on electrical? What else is on your mind about electrical? Let's see. Okay, we've got a couple questions about electrical. Hey Nick, welcome. Thanks for popping by and saying hey. Ceiling fans or lights. Yeah, that's a good thing. We can show some examples of and cover. So I love ceiling fans. I'm running one right now. It's super handy for me, especially being at a computer, because I have a remote to control how fast the blades are going. If I'm hot, if I'm cold, I can adjust that. It's a lifesaver for me. Anytime you do replace a light fixture with a ceiling fan, do ask for some help to make sure that all the stuff up in the ceiling can support the weight of a ceiling fan. They're obviously a lot heavier than just a light fixture, and you don't want it to be going full blast and come down out of the ceiling and be flying around the room because it was spinning super quick. Don't want you to get hurt. Do have somebody help to make sure, if you're not aware, that it's secure up in the ceiling. If you're going just from one light fixture to the next, great, you should be just fine. Most light fixtures aren't heavy enough as well with that force of the wind blowing that it's ever a problem. So a couple things. Let's just do a ceiling light wiring. So these are kind of those boxes that I talked about. Every spot that there's an electrical device on a wall, whether it's an outlet, a switch, a light, there's some sort of electrical box in the wall. Sometimes they're plastic, sometimes they're metal, sometimes they're fiberglass. If there isn't one there should be. These create an enclosure for exposed wiring. So any other wiring that's outside of this box is going to be covered in plastic, so that way it's not causing fires. It's not somewhere you could possibly touch it and electrocute yourself. Most lights will wire like this. How to install a ceiling light? How cute. Okay, give us the picture. All right, we're gonna go back off of this one. Go to a different one. Here we go. So you'll usually have a black, a white, and then a ground. and the ground is usually just exposed copper wire. When you unscrew the light fixture, usually you unhook the new light fixture, you hook the black to it, you unhook the white on the old one, hook it to the white on the new one, do the ground wire, put it back up, you're done. Usually pretty simple, and I can like, it makes such a big difference to have a nice, newer, modern light fixture opposed to some of those really old ones that are dreary. They're so easy to change out. Again, shut off the power, make sure everything's safe. But they just make such a big difference of ambiance, light color, comfort, self-expression, all of that. I always change out so many of my light fixtures whenever I buy a place because I want them to represent me. You have to look at them all the time. I want them to be something I want to look at. So ceiling fans are a touch more complicated, but not much. Yeah, this one actually. So ceiling fans will have, nope, that's actually not ceiling fan wiring. Let me clarify. Sometimes ceiling fans are just the same as light fixtures. You've got a black wire, a white wire, and a ground wire. But ceiling fans themselves usually also have a blue wire, or yellow, or some other color. That's because a lot of ceiling fans have the capability to have the light controlled separately from the fan itself. So you can have like two switches on your wall that one does the light, one does the fan. So you'll have that other wire up in the ceiling fan. If you have a ceiling fan that does have those three wires, but you only have one switch on the wall, people just put the blue and the black wire together to the black wire in the ceiling. That way just everything's got power at the same time. But when you do have those multiple switches, you will connect like the black to black. It's usually a red wire in the ceiling that you'll connect to like the blue, and then white to white, and then ground to ground. Same thing, you pop it up and done. So it's quite easy. I know it seems daunting. Have somebody help you the first time and you'll be very impressed of how easy it actually is to do. Okay. Let's pull up some other pictures of some panels. There's a few memes or shorts with some great audio. There's one of this old woman or I think there's like it's an electrician, and he's like he's looking at a panel like this, and you see smoke happening. It's just an absolute mess of wires, and the voice is like an older lady, and she's like, my grandson Thomas is so handy, or whatever his name is. He helped me with my electrical, and it's been so great. And as the electrician is like seeing the smoke, he's like, when did his house burn down? And she's like, oh, about 2 years ago. How did you know? And it's like, well, it's pretty obvious. If the panel looks like this, should not look like this. This is just chaos. One, it should be enclosed so it's safe. Because, when you start having fire and stuff melts and can potentially cause damage in your home, don't do this. A lot of proper electricians will make panels with even all this massive wiring look like an art piece. It's crazy. Here's a good kind of before and after, right? You've got wires just everywhere. This one doesn't even have breakers yet. But then the finished product is the breakers are in, wires are very cleanly, neatly organized. everything's labeled, everything's flowing right next to each other, and it's not this big massive mess. If you hire an electrician and they don't, it doesn't look like that when they're done, tell them to fix it. This one's a little in between. This one's clean enough you could put the cover on it and it would be okay. But you can see you've got all the white wires, kind of following a path to the same place. All the black wires are flowing into the breakers is usually where they go, or the red wires. Sometimes you do have black and white going to one. That's when you have that GFI situation. This one's not amazing, but definitely much worse is out there. These might even be some knob and tube. You see kind of how they're black. A lot of the common wire that we use these days is called Romex. You've probably seen the bright yellow. You've probably seen white, like some of those. There's also pink. I saw that one recently. I bought some. There's also blue. There's brown. There's orange. The color usually just signifies how much current or how much power that wire can handle. So white handles the least, but that's what most outlets use in the home. Yellow is for like one step up, so like microwaves, fridges, furnaces, things that can pull a little bit more power. And then orange is usually stuff for like an electric dryer, sometimes black, sometimes orange, depending what it is. But for electric stoves, that pulls a ton of power. These are using bigger wires. And if you know the price of copper, wire can be very expensive, very quick. The other power item, smoke alarms. I think we might just cover electricity all this entire day today. Most smoke alarms are now required to be hardwired, is what they're called. So in the ceiling, it's going to be, there's going to be a box, just like these electrical boxes we've talked about, that's going to have a black wire and a white wire. Usually there's also a red wire, we'll get to that in a second, and then a ground wire. This allows these smoke alarms to constantly have power when the power's on, and it'll like charge the batteries so that when the power does go out, you actually have charged up batteries and you're not having to swap them out all the time. Here's a good example of those boxes. They literally are like a big plastic box. Yeah. So we've got black wire, white wire, the ground wire, and then a red wire. When you have multiple smoke alarms in a home, which you should have one in every bedroom, and then in common areas, one on every floor. Sometimes if it's a really wide floor, you should have two that are in the common areas. Black is usually a power. The white is a neutral. Sometimes people call it a negative. The red is a communication line. In this case is what it's used for. You know how those situations where you have one smoke alarm go off and all of them go off? That's the red wire. It's a safety thing though. When you've got some smoldering fire starting in the basement, and by the time any of that smoke gets upstairs, you can't get outside the home because there's a massive fire happening. That's why that red wire exists, is to have them all talk to each other and trigger each other so that if one goes off, they all go off, find the problem, get out of the house. So these are pretty simple. You'll usually have a plate that comes with them. Connect the two black wires in the wall. Sometimes there's only one to the black wire on the smoke alarm piece. Connect the white, and then sometimes it's orange or green or some other color. That's the one that goes to the red. Usually they still have batteries. And then test them to make sure they all go off. Make sure that that's working properly. If you didn't know, smoke alarms expire. Just by being up there, they're collecting dust, debris. Over time, they start to not work very well. So if you take it off, it will have an expiration date on the back. It's usually about 10 years. So if you haven't changed yours in 10 years, I recommend you change them. They come with this little connector, most of them, and the connector is interchangeable. So when you get a new one, you can just take the smoke alarm down, undo the connector, put the new one on the connector, and put it back up. Let me show you a good picture of what the connector looks like. Different brands have different connectors. Some of them look like this. This is another common one. Let's see. This white part at the bottom is the most common one I see. Usually they don't have this top piece. It's just open wires. So you'd, again, connect the black to black, white to white, and then this other color wire to the red. Part of those common area smoke alarms should be carbon monoxide in addition to smoke. So again, if you don't have one of those, highly recommend you do. Easy to swap out, easy to change out. Make sure the power's shut off. There'll be a separate breaker, usually just for the smoke alarms. Use your tester to make sure all the power's shut off. Great way to make sure you and your family stay safe. Yeah, here's kind of that same example. Every bedroom, and then one on every floor. So bedroom, kitchen, living room, basement. Part of what the CO2 is for is our furnaces, most of them run on gas. So should there be an issue and it's putting carbon monoxide into the house, you don't want to pass out from that. So it'll alarm and tell you to get out of the home. Sometimes gas stoves will do the same. Gas fireplaces, all that stuff. Make sure you're safe. There's that picture I was looking for. Yep, so that's the most common connector you'll see. So this will be plugged into the back of the smoke alarm. When you unscrew it, pull it down, pop that connector out, new connector, up you go, done. Okay, good question. If you have a circuit breaker that keeps popping, probably have a professional come check it out. It could be a situation that there's a screw that's gone through the wire somehow. You might have hung something up on a wall and didn't realize it and actually ran a screw through the wire in the wall, and it's causing problems. It's sparking, it's doing different stuff. Have a professional come and check that out if it's popping. It's kind of that idea of new homes are designed well enough that you should be able to run the microwave, the toaster, and the vacuum at the same time, because they're all going to be on different circuits. Older homes, they did a lot of circuits, covered a large range of area. There's a lot of ways to break up old circuits and put in some new outlets so that you don't have that situation when you turn on the vacuum and the microwave's running, the circuit breaker clicks and off the lights go, and you got to go find your flashlight and go downstairs and all that good stuff. So yeah, have a professional come check out what exactly is happening to make sure it's safe for you. All right. We are just about at time. I don't see any other questions, but as any folks watch this, if you have questions, reach out to me. If you need a referral for an electrician, reach out to me. I've got a couple in my book that I've worked with that do good work, that are relatively inexpensive. Yeah, happy to always help with that. We'll meet again for Ask Me Anything on Friday at 9 a.m. Likely, I think we'll be talking plumbing as a home system and digging into some quick tips and some quick fixes, because I'm sure we've all seen that terrible old faucet, and it's 1990s fabulously gold, and we'd love to change it out for something black. Make it a little more modern. Okay, well, I will see you all Friday. Thanks for joining. Talk to you later.